Welcome to A Real Authority. Today I'm talking about Lee Cronin's The Mummy, not the sophomore effort of Lee Cronin, but his junior effort, or the movie that he directed after Evil Dead Rise, which was surprisingly entertaining. Given the fact that the Mummy movies usually have a formula, this one takes a completely different direction, in which a long time ago this young girl disappeared, and she mysteriously reappears in Egypt in this tomb, in which the parents are trying to reconnect with their daughter, even though she shows signs of, well, something different. That's definitely what I could say. Actually, no, that's an understatement because she starts exuding signs of demonic activity and just general creepiness. I'm going to be really honest. I do feel like Lee Cronin's The Mummy was one of those movies in which you can't ignore the red flags. Negative test screenings, like I know test screenings are basically designed to make sure the movie's as good as it could possibly be. But the test screenings were so bad that word got out about how bad it was. So that kind of didn't give me any hope. And then the trailers didn't do this movie any favors, just making it seem like a bit of that generic Blumhouse film, which you've seen a billion times over. Just with Lee Cronin. I know there are a lot of filmmakers who have that one film and then unfortunately fall off. I was afraid that that would be the case with Lee Cronin's The Mummy. So yeah, I wasn't really expecting it to be good. I'm surprised to say it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It is a major downstep from Evil Dead Rise, though. Maybe given my low expectations, I was not as disappointed as maybe some other people would be. But by no means is this a perfect movie. I guess starting off with the positives, the acting. Like, I do feel like all the performances are generally solid. Not to sound rude, but none of them really stand out, except Natalie Grace as the titular Katie. She's similar to the standout of Evil Dead Rise, even though I do feel there's a lot of restraint in terms of, I don't know, how far this movie goes in terms of her character, and that's by no means Grace's fault, but whenever it got creepy and just generally inventive with her character, I feel like Grace's performance meets that execution as much as you would hope it would be. Lee Cronin's directing, I do feel he brought a lot of that Evil Dead Rise flavor into this movie, for better and worse. Like, I do feel in terms of the horror and suspense, there are a lot of moments, and I mean a lot of them, in which you're absolutely invested. Say what you will about the screenplay, I certainly will in a minute. This movie really does a solid job at building an atmosphere which is scary and doesn't feel the need or complete need to rely on jump scares. I'm pretty sure there are jump scares here and there, but it really does feel like a different blend of horror, although you may have seen it in Evil Dead Rise, and this is definitely less goofy than Evil Dead Rise. But you know, it did work in terms of ramping up the horror and suspense. A lot of that has to do with the cinematography from David Garbett. I didn't look up beforehand whether he was the cinematographer of Evil Dead Rise as well, but it definitely screams Evil Dead Rise, especially in terms of focusing in on certain elements, like certain faces being in the foreground while the other people are in the background. Shot structures that really made Evil Dead Rise such a neat experience. That is found here. Add on to the fact that Stephen McKean's score is far and away better than I thought it was going to be. There's no reason the score has to be this good. It's loud, don't get me wrong. Like, I know a lot of horror movies rely on, loud sounds. And while this movie does do that, I do feel it's done in such a unique way that I just can't believe it actually worked for this movie. It just helps to build the suspense and the horror in such an inventive way that I'm kind of baffled that Lee Cronin's The Mummy carries this exceptional score. Also, say what you will about the finale, I felt that was the best stretch of the movie, even though it does feature some of the movie's big flaws. But in terms of finale, it's hands down the best part of this entire experience. Before getting into negatives, I do have to say that one of the, meh things about this movie and what was a letdown is the screenplay. Like, I do feel Cronin's screenplay, it has a lot of solid moments, but in terms of, like, getting you invested in the characters, it does and it doesn't do an effective job. Like, I do feel the performances really do sell it, but at a point, kind of realize that the character development isn't as strong as you want it to be. I'm not saying it's like basic development. There are a lot of elements that provide intrigue in terms of the character development, but I did not feel that it was as strong as it needed to be. Granted, it's a horror movie. I'm not trying to paint it as like bad character development or bad screenplay. It just doesn't live up to, the cinematography, the direction, as well as the scares. Also the pacing, which is my last mix, transitioning into negative. Like, I do feel the pacing at 2 hours and 14 minutes. Even though the movie goes completely haywire most of the time and you're intrigued, if not engaged, I do feel there are a lot of moments in which it does try to slow it down, in which it does contrast, and a lot of that may have to do with the screenplay not really being strong enough to really be engaged with the characters, so I also have to mention that. Now, in terms of the negatives, like, I do feel there are two really big negatives that I think weigh it down for me. A lot of that has to do with how much it does take from Evil Dead Rise. Like, I'm not saying it's a direct copycat of that movie. I'm just saying, in terms of when this movie goes over the top, it really does feel like it's trying to one up Evil Dead Rise to the point where, yeah, this is more disgusting than Evil Dead Rise and maybe any of the other Evil Dead movies, even the first NC-17 one. To the point where, if you're not familiar with horror movies and you were just like, hey, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, this will be my introduction. That was a bad choice because there's so much gore in here that it gets to the point where if you're not okay with it, you're not okay with this movie. Like, even I, who, even though it's in the negatives, I do feel a decent amount of gore does work, can't help but feel like, yeah, it was kind of just unnecessary and just include here cuz. Also, aside from it being a horror movie, it does try to, like, unravel the mystery, especially with the tagline, "What happened to Katie?" And this movie has a hard time balancing those two objectives in a way that really makes you feel as on the ride as possible. Because you got horror moments happening here, and then we cut back to the mystery of why this is happening. I'm not saying either of them are bad, I'm just saying they don't mesh as well as you would hope. Before I forget, even though the movie is trying to be like a straight-faced horror movie, it does include some comedy that, yeah, is out of place. I'm not going to get into too much detail. I'm just saying, when the moments do show up, namely in the finale, yeah, you just can't help but cringe. To wrap things up, Lee Cronin's The Mummy was better than I was expecting it to be. Like, I did enjoy a lot of it. Mainly because of just how surprising its approach to horror was. I think a lot of what made Evil Dead Rise such a pleasant surprise works here for its benefit and detriment in a lot of places. I can't say it's like a great movie, but I'm happy to say it's not exactly a bad one and not as bad as I was expecting it to be. I do feel like if you're a horror movie fan, like whether you're a casual one who really does not care about like strong character development, and even if you are like one of those people who are lobbying for like strong character development, you might be able to look past some of this movie's flaws and just have a great time. So I do feel like if you're a horror movie fan, yeah, absolutely seek it out in theaters. I feel like for everybody else, yeah, you're not going to have as great of a time as you would want out of a movie like this. Given my feelings on it, I'll give it the rating of The Real Authority approves for streaming, 6 out of 10. Again, if you feel it's worth going out and seeing it in theaters, don't let me stop you. I'm just saying, in terms of how I felt about it, it's not as great as I would want it to be. But yeah, it's something solid. It's decent. I think that's about it. So make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications, and comment your thoughts on the movie. And let me know what your favorite or least favorite Mummy movie is, even though this movie is really different. I don't know, but I mean, let me know. All right, peace.